Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. So today we're going to finish up radical simplification, specifically dealing with solving proportions involving radicals. So here's what that's going to look like. So remember from before, if we had something like x over 3 equals 7 over 5. We cross multiply here and we get 21 equals x times 5. So we divide both sides by 5 and we get 21/5 equals x. That's how we did cross multiplication. Well, now we're going to do the same thing, except for it's going to involve radicals. So I'm still going to take 4 times 4. I'm going to take x times all this. And I'm going to get, so 4 times 4 equals x times radical 7 minus 1. Well, 4 times 4 is 16. And now from there, I want to get x by itself. How to get x by itself? Well, x is being multiplied by radical 7 minus 1, so I'm going to divide by radical 7 minus 1. That cancels, so I get 16 equals, or 16 over radical 7 minus 1 equals x. We're really close. The only issue here is I have a radical in the denominator, so I need to get rid of that. So let's simplify that. So I get x equals 16 over radical 7 minus 1. So I got to multiply this by radical 7 plus 1 over radical 7 plus 1. And again, the reason why I'm allowed to do that is because what's radical 7 plus 1 divided by radical 7 plus 1? Anything divided by itself is 1. So I'm not multiplying it by anything special, I'm just multiplying by itself. I'm multiplying by 1, so it becomes itself. So that's what's called a clever 1. I'm multiplying it by something that equals 1, so it doesn't change the value, it's only changing the form. So remember when we do this, you multiply straight across. So I get x equals 16 radical 7, or I'll write it like this, 16 times radical 7 plus 1, all over radical 7 minus 1 times radical 7 plus 1. Now here's where we need to distribute up top, and we're going to FOIL on the bottom. So on the top, I'm going to get x equals 16 radical 7 plus 16 all over radical 7 times radical 7 is 7. Radical 7 times 1 is radical 7. Negative 1 times radical 7 is going to be just negative radical 7. And negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. So when I simplify this all down, I'm going to get 16 radical 7 plus 16 all over, that cancels, 7 minus 1, 6. And because 16, 16, and 6 are all divisible by 2, I'm going to divide everything by 2, and I get 8 radical 7 plus 8 all over 3. And that will be my final answer. Okay, let's try another one like that. This one, cross multiply. So I get 1 times 4, which is 4, equals, actually, I'll write that on the other side. I get x times radical 13 minus 1 equals 4 times 1, which is 4. Again, I need to get x by itself. It's being multiplied by radical 13 minus 1. So I'm going to divide by radical 13 minus 1. So that gets me, when I do that to both sides, that cancels. I get x equals 4 over radical 13 minus 1. All right, so now I just got to simplify this just like we did before. Can't have radicals in the denominator. Radical 13 minus 1, or plus 1. Radical 13 plus 1. Remember, if this is a minus, this is a plus. just like over here, this was a minus, so I would make these pluses. All right, so when I multiply this, I get x equals 4 radical 13 plus 1 all over radical 13 times radical 13 is just 13. Radical 13 times 1 is just radical 13. Negative 1 times radical 13 is negative radical 13. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. So I get x, and I'm going to distribute these. So I get 4 radical 13 plus 4 all over, these cancel, 13 minus 1 is 12. And again, 4, 4, and 12, those are all divisible by 2, so I get x equals 2 radical 13 plus 2, oh, divisible by 4. Also divisible by 4, so I get radical 13 plus 1 all over 3. Now let's simplify it all the way down. All right, let's try these two. Cross multiply here. Again, I'm going to get x times radical 13 minus 1 equals 2. Divide both sides by radical 13 minus 1. Cancels, I get x equals 2 over radical 13 minus 1. I have to multiply both top and bottom by radical 13 plus 1 in order for it to change, or to get the radical out of there, because again, I can't have a radical in the denominator. So that gets me x equals 2 times radical 13 all over radical 13 minus 1 times radical 13 plus 1. Let's simplify that. X equals 2 times radical 13 plus 2 all over radical 13 times radical 13 is just 13. Radical 13 times 1 is radical 13. Negative 1 times radical 13 is negative radical 13. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. That cancels. I'm left with 2 radical 13 plus 2 all over 13 minus 1, which is 12. And because they're all divisible by 2, x equals radical 13 plus 1 all over 6. Last one here, same type of deal. I get x times radical 14 minus 1 equals 4. Divide both sides by radical 14 minus 1. That's canceled. I get x equals 4 over radical 14 minus 1. Got to multiply top and bottom by radical 14 plus 1 to get it to go away. So x equals 4 times radical 14 plus 1 all over radical 14 minus 1 times radical 14 plus 1. Distribute on top and FOIL on the bottom. So x equals 4 times radical 14 plus 1 all over radical 14 times radical 14 is just 14. Radical 14 times 1 is plus radical 14. Negative 1 times radical 14 is minus radical 14. And negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. So I get x equals 4 radical 14 plus 1 all over, those cancel, 13. And because 4, 1, and 13 have nothing in common, oh, it wouldn't be 1 plus 4. Because, yeah, they have nothing in common. See, it's like that. And that is how you solve for portions involving radicals. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Next time we will talk about solving other equations involving radicals as well.